Good morning and good night on the West Virginia Mountaineers 2021 season as West Virginia caps off that 2021 roller coaster of a year with a loss in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl to Minnesota. 18-6, the final score, as PJ Fleck gets the victory over Neal Brown in their first ever meeting between the programs. They do it in a baseball stadium. They do it with weirdness of a big guy touchdown, all kinds of controversy throughout. And I don't mean any controversy of the final result, but just the weirdness of the game, in which a broadcaster even actually asked the question if Jarret Doege will have a chance at the league at some point. And you might be staying up with me here at 2 a.m. East Coast Standard Time to watch this post-game show, or maybe you're just getting to bed after watching that Guaranteed Rate Bowl. This is your Guaranteed Rate Bowl post-game show here. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I am joined by our Karl Ludwig here of our Pittsburgh Sports Now Network and, of course, WV Sports Now. Karl, the Mountaineers lose this one 18-6. I mean, win or lose, it wasn't going to change much about this year. It was still a year where they had to fight and claw to get in a bowl game. They end up in a mediocre bowl game. It doesn't feel like they're climbing from where they were a season ago when they did win a little better of a bowl game and securing that earlier on in that season. Obviously, it's been up and down for Jarret Doege. It's been up and down for Neal Brown and for this team. It felt like a matchup that was bad for West Virginia without Leddie Brown and a strong Minnesota defense that honestly, they kind of squandered what could have been a special year for them with a couple bad losses. They could have been right there in the Big Ten, certainly in the Big Ten West. They do end up winning the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. We'll see how much longer it's actually called that. Was there anything at all in this game that felt like the Mountaineers had a chance in this game? Was this just a game that was a bad matchup? How did this game unravel in terms of your thoughts entering this game? As Minnesota wins it handily, it was ugly early. It's not like they dominated in terms of their own level of play, but West Virginia just never could get anything going. So whatever Minnesota did on the ground was certainly enough.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough matchup. That's a very good Gophers team. It's very well coached with PJ Fleck. They have a great defense. Their offensive line and defensive line play is incredible. And tonight they're just a better team. And I think overall they're just a much better team than West Virginia is. And it showed throughout the entire game tonight. It wasn't like a contest really the entire game. It was just 18-6 is a pretty generous score for tonight. It could be much worse than it was.
It could have been, here, Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here, our Guaranteed Rate Bowl post-game show. The Mountaineers lose that Guaranteed Rate Bowl in Arizona, the D-back stadium, who is owned by West Virginia alum. So disappointed in this outcome for him, even though he's supposed to be impartial, as the Mountaineers lose at 18-6. And I kind of knew it was – I actually have a text message to prove this to a friend of mine. I'll show it to you. I thought this would be a weird, funky score like this. I think I thought 15-6, so I spotted him a little less than that, those extra 3 points there on a field goal. 18-6, that includes a touchdown and then going for two early. It includes a big guy touchdown. I kind of like the way PJ Fleck called this game, just letting it all hang out there. Neal Brown got a little more aggressive than normal as well. But yeah, West Virginia just felt like a much worse team. Minnesota, again, a team that had a solid year, a veteran team that could even have done more in the Big Ten West and in the Big Ten this year if it wasn't for a couple clunkers against Illinois and even Bowling Green earlier in the year. So they win this, whatever that means. It's still a mediocre bowl game. They end up with their 9th win, though. West Virginia now 6-7 on the year. You saw another miserable performance from Jarret Doege in a bowl game, and this even goes back to a bowl victory. He hasn't really played well in most of the big games for Doege. You have the bowl win. You have a couple big games here or there, but for the most part, it's been up and down for him. One of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12 this past year, numbers-wise, but the Big 12, different than it was in years past, is not necessarily a passing league any longer, so that's taken with a grain of salt. You do see Garrett Green briefly fumbles the snap. He's back out of there. As I said at the top, they talk on the broadcast of whether Doege is going to come back and if he's going to league. I don't know what league they're talking about. Maybe it's a beer league, but he's definitely coming back based on, anyone who follows this program and not just covering a game nationally once a year. He's coming back. He's going to be the guy. It doesn't appear Neal Brown's looking at anything else. Did anything occur in this game that changes your mind at all on the outlook for this team next year, whether it be positively or even whether it be now you're more pessimistic on Jarret Doege and this team? They didn't have Lady Brown in this game, but they weren't going to have him next year anyway. You have Darius Stills or Dante Stills in this game. You lost Darius a year ago, but you have Dante Stills in this game. He played well. He's not going to be there next year. So the rare bright spots aren't going to be there next year. And really, they get manhandled in this game. They're under 500 on the year. They lose a mediocre bowl game. Does this game impact your view for next year, or is it a bowl game you can throw away and you still have your same thoughts prior?
It's not much of an impact, I'd say. It's kind of what we all thought it would be. Doege wasn't very good, but then the whole offense just wasn't good. I mean, he had almost no time in the pocket tonight. He was hitting every single play. And he's just, I mean, there's not much more to say about Jarret Doege at this point. If he comes back again, which it does appear to be, what's the point? I mean, what is the plan here with Jarret Doege and Neal Brown? I mean, it's stuck in a stall here, if not going backwards. It's just, there's not much sense in him coming back next year, because as a 6-year senior, he hasn't made a jump at any point in his career here.
Yeah.
The worst 4-year starter in college football. It makes no sense at this point.
I guess if he wants to play, that's what sense it would make. If I'm Jarret Doege and I want to play,
he'll keep playing. But just from an offensive standpoint, there really is no point in him playing again next year.
Yeah, and there was commentary though on some of these games at the end of the year, and you did see some flashes of another year. Winston Wright had even said this in a post game. Another year of Doege. I feel like we can build this chemistry. All of that. It appears it's less and less as these games go by. And again, maybe this was a really bad matchup. The offensive line did not have a solid day. They certainly had a rough season, which is why Lady Brown took a while to even get going in the beginning of this year. And this was just a bad day at the office for an offensive line that's already struggling, very undersized in this game. A major problem. So this might have been honestly the worst matchup of even any Big Ten team they could have had with the way Minnesota's built. But still, we're 2 a.m. here, and we're coming off of this game and watching what we watched. It's hard to give you any type of optimism. And yeah, it's hard to believe that it's not going to be Jarret Doege, though, and it's not going to be this team moving forward. Is there anything to be said, though, for a glass half full take that this was a really, really bad matchup? Bowl games are very hard to gauge anything off of. Some people do argue they're just legitimately exhibitions, which in all reality, outside the playoff, they certainly outside the major bowl games, they really are, even though Minnesota's taking home a trophy in this game. Can you argue that it just doesn't matter and it's a bad matchup? And if they say would have played Maryland or another Big Ten team around the same level as them, you might have seen a better result and a better effort from the overall group, win or lose.
I mean, you can look to bright spots. I mean, Mathis looked pretty good tonight. Maybe he'll come in next year. Have a nice pairing with Lynn J. Dixon. But it's just, I mean, the game was pointless. There really wasn't much to take away, good or bad, from that game. But it's just another bad performance from Neal Brown's team, and that's not going to help him whatsoever next season. I mean, his seat is as hot as it's ever been now. The fans are not happy with how they're playing. Right. He's getting a lot of flack on social media. It's just to end on that note and now have 9 months of nothing. It's going to be a long, long winter in Morgantown.
Yeah, and at least they got that Kansas win to get bowl eligible. But as we talked about on that post-game show, that depending on how you end is what the conversation going to be all off season. And yeah, they end in a poor manner. You lose a mediocre bowl game to a team that, better than you, but you didn't feel like this many light years better than you. Yeah, and it might have been a bad matchup, but it's still a bad taste in your mouth as well, as the Mountaineers do lose to Minnesota 18-6 here. Our guaranteed rate bowl post-game show. Maybe the last one of these we'll ever be able to do, because again, I don't know how much longer it's even going to be called this. The former Cactus Bowl, the former Insight.com Bowl from years ago, the former Cheez-It Bowl, even though there's now a new Cheez-It Bowl. It's currently the guaranteed rate bowl. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now. Head over to WVSN for the game recap there from Julia and any of our post-game coverage as well, which will matriculate throughout now the morning and into your day that now goes from here because of the start time, East Coast Standard Time. I mean, you're still ending in another day, even if you're going into Arizona time there. That's how crazy late this game eventually did start, probably at the end of the coverage for even anybody there, as they're maybe, 10, 11 p.m. right now. West Virginia, I don't know how many bright spots you can take here. Anything to make you feel worse, to get it glass half empty here? I mean, you're mentioning that maybe there could be a bright spot or two, even though this is a bad matchup. If you just want to cling to the matchup, maybe Mathis would be that bright spot. But yeah, maybe you're throwing away a bowl game, and yeah, they're still concerned about Doege, who I think we both realize is just coming back, whether you like it or not. But are there any glass half empty negative takes that you can have from this game that would have you sitting there at 1 a.m. thinking this team actually is worse than I thought? Or can you maybe is that just reactionary, and after you go to sleep tonight, you're like, it's just a really, really bad matchup, and hey, it's the guaranteed rate bowl?
Yeah, well, I mean, watching that game, I mean, you have to think that something is going to change offensively what personnel, positional players, something has got to give. That they cannot bring that offense back out next year.
Well, what can give, I guess, is another question. What can give? If you're bringing Doege back, you're losing Neal Brown. Mathis is probably now your starter. He's still coming off being a backup, even though maybe he had a solid game or so. The O-line get a little bit more experience, but how much better will they be? Just maturation process. Winston Wright. You're gonna have a similar group, and it's gonna be Neal Brown still calling the shots with his guru style from Troy that is yet to translate to West Virginia in the Big 12.
I mean, the obvious one is Doege, but that appears to be like, I mean, if he's coming back next year, it's not to ride the bench. He'll be the starter. So That's one area that's kind of locked up. Offensive line got to get better. Coach Moore, he might be in the hot seat, maybe he's not, but something has to give there. It's just the offense is just stale. I mean, there was no momentum.
They're not even fun to watch, honestly.
They're not. There are very, very few cool, exciting plays. I mean, probably 3 or 4 plays that were like, wow, that's a very cool play. Right. The rest of it is just boring, stale, no innovation, no excitement, and that has to change. Because and this is Neal Brown is an offensive guy. This is his baby here.
Sure, yeah.
They're not good. They've held the team back now for far too long with some very good defenses. Defense tonight was pretty solid. Kind of got gashed at times, but it was a good performance defensively, and the offense just let them down yet again, and that cannot keep happening.
Yeah, and most big games this year, the defense did show up, and sometimes they're able to get enough from the offense to get a win, like against Virginia Tech, even though the Hokies have been kind of exposed to being a little overrated from that point after that game. But even going to the Oklahoma game, you can't ask for more from the defense. You end up still not getting a victory because the offense gives you next to nothing. We've seen the offense put up a field goal in games this year. This time ends up with the touchdown and then the miss after that. So the offense is stale. The offense is not entertaining, but it does feel like most of the cast of characters are going to be coming back defensively. It's actually been a good group now for 2 years in a row, which was nice. They actually mentioned that on the broadcast. Last year, the defense, one of the best in all of college football. It's amazing as that sounds if you look at the stats and the rankings. And it didn't do much for the team effort. But when you have an offense like this, what can you expect? Last year, they do end the year with a bowl victory over Army. Felt like they were climbing. This year doesn't feel that way. And neutral, if not falling off that mountain, the pressure will certainly mount on Neal Brown to turn it around. But this year was the year maybe he was supposed to get some house money and then be able to go through a maturation process next year before Nico, because next year it's actually arguably going to be harder, since it could be a worse roster next year than this year. Is there going to potentially, in your eyes, be any chance of a shorter leash for Doege? He's going to be back, but next year maxes it out. No matter what their relationship is, he can't be back again. So any chance of a shorter leash? And do you feel at all, certainly it appeared evident in this game, Garrett Green appears, bungles a snap, and gets benched. And we've seen him less and less throughout the year. Neal Brown has not said much about this and kind of dances around it when anytime anyone brings up Garrett Green, just kind of mentioning he's not ready from what he sees in practice. He does get appearances but they're next to nothing. I'm not sure what they were talking about on the broadcast. They saw all these random plays from Garrett Green this year. They must have watched week 2 or 3 because it's been few and far between since then. So do you feel there could be any shorter release for Doege this year if Doege starts off the year slow, even though it's a relatively easy schedule outside of Pitt and the Brawl, Kansas, Townsend? At the worst case scenario, you should start 2-1 those first 3 games to open up the year and put some numbers up, even if not against Pitt. A shorter release for Doege. And then has Garrett Green lost favor to the point that he might not even be the guy if Doege ends up getting benched? I mean, would you almost give Garrett Green advice to get the hell out of town? I mean, if he wants to play, because it appears he's in the doghouse. Could there be a shorter leash for Doege, though? And then is there any chance they would look to a true freshman or something else at quarterback mid-season rather than just have another year of 6 wins at the most, if that is the ceiling for Doege?
Right. Well, in terms of Garrett Green, I mean, Neal Brown must know just who Garrett Green is, because we, as fans, as media, who knows who he is? He's done nothing in games right now. He hasn't proven or done anything because he hasn't had a chance to. Every snap he gets is a little draw play. And that's fine if you want to use him that way, but can he throw the ball at all? I mean, we've seen 3 or 4 passes maybe the whole season. I'm just
they're not even designed pass
really
plays.
Sure who he is. Yeah. So in terms of him, I guess just he kind of is in Neal Brown's doghouse in a little bit of a way there. And behind him you have Crowder, who has done even less than him. Nico will be a true freshman. I highly doubt he'll play at all next season. So I mean, it's Neal Brown's put all his eggs into Jarret Doege's basket, and I mean, we all know who he is. If Neal Brown's happy with that, then I guess that's what we're gonna get, because there isn't much behind him.
I guess, but I would imagine there'd have to be a shorter leash next year. I don't know. As we get towards closing up shop here, because it is late, Carl, if you're in charge, Karl Ludwig, how would, if we agree and you have to give it to Shane Lyons, okay, Doege is starting, say you're the O coordinator or some position I'm going to make up for you, and Doege is going to start next year. You cannot win that argument. How would you handle it? Would you be willing to be convinced to go through freshman if everyone at the program agrees Garrett Green just cannot throw the ball and he's going to have to only be a gadget player who's in the doghouse and you have no experience otherwise to consider? Neal Brown is on the hot seat, so you can't punt a year. I get you don't want to burn eligibility if you don't have to, and you do have belief in Nico, but there could be a thought process. He's the best of the bunch, and you don't not want to hurt. Do you want to burn eligibility, or do you want to punt a year? I mean, that could then be a debate that we're having in week 4 next year.
Right. Well, I mean, it'd been nice to see anything from Garrett Green or from Will Crowder this season down the stretch. When I mean, to give him even just give him a quarter or anything, just let him play, because
he didn't get it
on the stretch here. It was all Jarret Doege, and that's fine. He was the best chance to win, but that's not saying much.
Right.
You finish 6 and 7, the season's a wash, if not worse.
Right.
So what was the point of this season if not to just give Jarret Doege more playing time?
I'm just concerned that we're going to have the conversation next year of what was the point of next season. I guess that's what I'm trying to avoid. Is there a way to avoid that? Can there be a point to next season?
Well, I think if Doege does this again next season, but when we enter Big 12 play, I think you have to yank him, and you have to kind of have to just burn the season and see what you have. Because if this happens next year and you play him to the end of the season and just let him play, that's 2 seasons just wasted. Wasted with no purpose, with no resolve, nothing. It's just down the drain, and that cannot happen.
Right.
So, and even if you lose some games to start off, you have to see what you have behind him.
Yeah, and you can see 2020 with being a COVID year, and at that point he was gaining some experience. At that point, you thought he was getting better. He did show flashes at certain points during the year. You got the major bowl victory, even though you weren't happy the year before, but the cover was then bare the year before. But then this year, and I guess the issue was that you kept having the argument, and it was true, a bowl game is better than not a bowl game, and you're fighting for a bowl game at the end of that year. So if you went to Garrett Green and Neal Brown clearly doesn't believe he can be a passer or believe in him much, you probably might have maybe you risk the bowl game and you end up with 5 wins instead of 6. That's how close it was. So they wanted the bowl game, even if it's a poor showing like this and they don't win the bowl game. They got the bowl game. Neal Brown felt Doege was the best guy to get him in that bowl game, hook or crook, and he was probably right. I would imagine that on that roster, he was the best guy to get him in a bowl game. Green might have fell shy of the bowl game, but maybe long-term you would have been better off winning only 5 games, missing the bowl game. Maybe you might have somehow actually, the funny thing about this, Karl, the way things unfolded in this college football season the past week or so with COVID, you might have got in a bowl game anyway.
Yeah.
They might have found themselves somehow in a bowl game. So who knows? But yeah, it did not work out in that respect. As we close up shop here on the Guaranteed Rate Bowl post-game show, the Mountaineers lose at 18-6 to Minnesota in everything you could imagine this bowl game could have been. And I mean, as asinine as you could have imagined, as we're doing the post-game show here at 2 a.m. East Coast time, and it's called the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. You see a big guy touchdown. You see a missed extra point, or a missed a 2-point conversion attempt. You see a successful 2-pointer. You see Doege throwing picks. Again, you see conversation about the NFL and Jarret Doege, which I never thought I would hear anywhere in the world. And I still can't get over. What are you looking for as West Virginia now goes into the offseason? So we can't really talk about the games being played next year yet because there's so much unknown. But as they go into the offseason, people just complain and talk about this on Twitter for 6 months. Then you get to camp and they're trying to figure out the roster as well as getting that class into Morgantown and thinking about maybe a new era of Mountaineer football, even if some of these players are still going to be back. What are you looking for, and what needs to happen for this program to legitimately climb? Because Neal Brown's asking fans, alums, former players, the athletic department to trust a climb, and an argument can be made they are no longer climbing, and they are not even really in neutral. They need to get that climb going again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, it's about results. You can talk all you want. I mean, this past offseason, all discussion revolved around Jarret Doege's big breakout season coming up. He was faster, stronger, more accurate.
Right.
Didn't happen. If that happens again and he gets more hype again, no one's gonna care. It's all for nothing. So it's all about getting into the offseason, putting together an actual team, whether that's with transfers now, with bringing in the guys, the younger guys now who can come in and play. You have to come out next season and start off fast. If they come out next season and get blown out by Pitt in the backyard brawl, it'll be a disaster. I know it gets easier after that for a couple games, but you cannot come out flat again next year like this season. And with this current team, the offense mainly coming back, mainly the same, minus Letty Brown, something's got to give. Like this offense cannot come out again next season like the way it is right now.
Yeah, and we talked about this. Neal Brown didn't really put the effort in to go to that transfer portal with the rules where you pretty much can treat it like NFL free agency. He is certainly riding Jarret Doege. It almost appears he's letting Jarret Doege call the shots on whether he wants to come back and start, which I don't know how it appeared Jarret Doege is somehow running the WVU football program. What a world. So it's going to be a lesser Mountaineer roster, you would imagine, in the birth of the backyard brawl with a packed stadium. If Jarret Doege is going to play in the NFL, he'll be able to start it by playing in an NFL stadium in Pittsburgh, at least. But that's going to have so much hype around it. Fans, media, etc. in the region. Mountaineer fans might actually outnumber Pitt fans even at Heinz Field. It's certainly possible. And Pitt is losing Kenny Pickett. They're going to be less than they were this year in their special season. But obviously with Slovis and company and what they have done in the transfer portal and still having Addison there, that's a better Pitt roster than what West Virginia is putting forth. You never know with that rivalry. Mountaineer fans know that all too well. But it's hard to, as we stand now, to think that's not a blowout victory for Pitt. And then Towson in Kansas is not going to make anyone feel any kinds of better.
Yeah.
After that, no matter what you do against those teams. And I also would like to bring this to an end on this somber note. Kansas has been competitive this season more than recently. Kansas didn't lose that bad to West Virginia as the Mountaineers became bowl eligible. If this is the same West Virginia team against the same Kansas team, I'm getting worried something might give and Kansas might be up for the upset because they're going to knock off somebody one of these years as they keep getting competitive. But boy, how embarrassing that would be here. Maybe things will change. Maybe a climb will occur right now. I can't be convinced there's a climb to be trusting. The Mountaineers certainly don't climb to any type of bowl victory. In fact, they fall off the map, losing the guaranteed rate bowl 18-6 to Minnesota as Minnesota climbs to the win as they win that mediocre bowl game. And we now will climb ourselves to bed to wrap up this post-game show and this season. Plenty more coverage, though, of course, in WV Sports Now. I'll have shows, we'll have commentary, we'll have recaps, we'll have analysis. We'll be talking about this offseason. You'll be talking about this offseason, as Karl put it as well. Neal Brown is now going to basically set the tone for a negative conversation for about 9 months. So if he wanted everyone to shut up, he would have needed to put better results on the table. And then I guess get excited for the backyard brawl, but it's probably hard to get Mountaineer fans excited for that right now at the state of this football program. Are you trusting the club?